GCSE History, Elizabethan England. Challenges facing Elizabeth. In this video, we are looking at her legitimacy, marriage and the succession, religion, finances, and threats from abroad. When Elizabeth became queen in 1558, she faced immense challenges as a young woman in a male-dominated society that doubted a female ruler's ability to lead. Her legitimacy was questioned due to her mother's execution and controversial marriage to Henry VIII, making her reign vulnerable to rivals at home and abroad. Religious divisions further complicated her position, as Elizabeth sought to bring unity to an England unsettled by the shifting religious policies of her predecessors. Her father, Henry VIII, who broke away from the Catholic Church, her brother, Edward VI, who made England more Protestant, and her sister, Mary I, who returned the country to Catholicism. Additionally, Elizabeth faced mounting pressure to marry and produce an heir to secure the Tudor dynasty, all whilst powerful Catholic nations like France and Spain posed threats to her authority. In navigating these obstacles, Elizabeth needed to assert her strength and independence to secure her rule. Legitimacy. Elizabeth's legitimacy as queen was one of the most significant challenges she faced. The Catholic Church never accepted her father, Henry VIII's, annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his first wife. As a result, in the eyes of the Church, Henry's marriage to Elizabeth's mother, Anne Boleyn, was invalid, and Elizabeth was considered illegitimate. This belief was further strengthened when Henry himself declared Elizabeth illegitimate, after Anne was executed on charges of treason. Although Henry later reversed this declaration, doubts over Elizabeth's right to the throne persisted. These doubts were particularly troubling because many Catholics viewed Mary, Queen of Scots, as the rightful heir. As a legitimate Catholic descendant of Henry VIII's sister, Mary, Queen of Scots represented a strong alternative to Elizabeth in the eyes of Catholic supporters. Many regarded Elizabeth as a usurper, someone who had taken the throne without a legitimate claim. This made Elizabeth vulnerable to plots and challenges from those who wished to see Mary replace her as queen. Marriage and the succession. Elizabeth faced significant challenges around the issues of marriage and the succession. When she became queen at 25, Elizabeth was considered old to be unmarried and without children by 16th century standards. This situation was concerning for her advisors and subjects, who feared the lack of an heir could plunge England into chaos if she died suddenly, especially after she contracted smallpox in 1562. The illness, which Elizabeth was lucky to survive, highlighted the danger of having no clear successor, and underscored the risk of a potential succession crisis that could lead to civil war or a foreign power seizing control. Elizabeth faced intense pressure to marry for several reasons, including strengthening her reign and securing England's future through a politically advantageous union, forming a valuable alliance with a foreign power which would bolster England's position in Europe, gaining loyalty from a powerful English noble family, increasing her support within the country, securing the Tudor line by producing a legitimate heir, thereby ensuring stability and continuity, and reducing the threat posed by the Catholic Mary Queen of Scots, a rival claimant who many viewed as a legitimate alternative to Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth had valid reasons for resisting marriage, including fear that marrying a foreign prince could give another country too much influence over England, potentially threatening its independence, concern that marriage could result in the loss of her own independence as queen, with her husband possibly trying to assert control over her rule. The significant dangers of childbirth in the 16th century. Women often risked their lives in the process. Elizabeth was keenly aware of these risks, as her stepmothers Jane Seymour and Catherine Parr both died from childbirth complications, and caution over her sister Mary's marriage to Philip II of Spain, which had been deeply unpopular in England and led to the rebellion of 1554, highlighting the potential unrest a foreign marriage could cause. Despite these challenges, Elizabeth had many powerful suitors, including Philip II of Spain, her close advisor Robert Dudley, and Francois, Duke of Alençon of France. Each match had advantages, but Elizabeth ultimately chose to remain unmarried, seemingly prioritising her independence and stability in England over the benefits a marriage might have brought. Religion. Religion was a central part of life in 1558, shaping daily routines, beliefs, and politics. When Elizabeth became Queen, England had undergone several drastic changes in religious direction, each bringing instability. Her father, Henry VIII, had broken from the Catholic Church in the 1530s to establish the Church of England, making himself its head. This marked the beginning of England's transition toward Protestantism, although many Catholic practices remained in place during his reign. Under Henry's son Edward VI, England moved further towards Protestantism, with significant reforms stripping away Catholic traditions. However, when Elizabeth's sister Mary I became Queen, she re-established Catholicism and sought to enforce it strictly, even executing hundreds of Protestants who refused to abandon their beliefs. This earned Mary the nickname Bloody Mary and left the nation divided and wary. Catholicism and Protestantism differed greatly. Religious authority. Catholics believed that the Pope is the head of the Church, whereas Protestantism has no Pope, believing that each church or monarch is in charge. Church decoration. Catholic churches are very decorative, with lots of art and statues to reflect the glory of God, whereas Protestant churches are plain, with little decoration so that people can focus on worship. Church services. Catholic church services are formal and traditional, often in Latin, whereas Protestant church services are simple and often in the local language. The Bible. Catholics believe that it is a key role of the priest to interpret the Bible, and people rely on them for guidance. However, in Protestantism, people are encouraged to read and interpret the Bible for themselves. Mass. In Catholicism, Mass is a central ritual where Catholics believe bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ. On the other hand, Protestants believe that the communion service is symbolic. Bread and wine are reminders of Christ's sacrifice, not his literal body and blood. Saints and the Virgin Mary. Saints and the Virgin Mary are very important in Catholicism, and they are prayed to. In contrast, saints are less important in Protestantism. The Virgin Mary is respected, but not prayed to. And beliefs about salvation. Catholics believe that people are saved by faith and doing good deeds, whereas Protestants believe that people are saved by faith alone, not by doing good deeds. These religious differences between Catholicism and Protestantism fueled tensions and even violence, as each monarch enforced their preferred faith. When Elizabeth became Queen, most of the clergy were Catholic, and there was a strong geographical divide. The north and west of England were predominantly Catholic, while London, the south east and East Anglia leaned towards Protestantism. Elizabeth herself was Protestant, but also practical, and recognised the need to balance religious beliefs to avoid further conflict. She aimed to create a religious settlement that could be accepted by as many of her subjects as possible. Elizabeth faced challenges from both Catholics and the growing Puritan movement within Protestantism. Many Catholics did not accept her as the rightful queen, viewing her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, as the legitimate heir, which led to tension and conspiracy. At the same time, Puritans, a group of strict Protestants, demanded further reforms to remove any remaining traces of Catholicism. Balancing these opposing pressures while maintaining stability was one of Elizabeth's greatest challenges as Queen. Finances. When Elizabeth became Queen, she inherited a country in serious financial difficulty. At that time, the Crown was responsible for covering the costs of running the country. This was funded through taxes, selling or renting crown lands, collecting fines, and receiving income from customs and duties on imported goods. However, due to the costly military campaigns led by her predecessors, England was left with a massive debt of £300,000. To put this into perspective, the Crown's annual income was only £286,667, giving Elizabeth very little financial flexibility. As a result, Elizabeth would have to rule with caution. She knew she couldn't afford foreign conflicts, which were costly and would add to the existing debt, so she was determined to avoid war unless necessary. Similarly, she avoided lavish spending, choosing not to build new palaces or fund extravagant projects, as every penny counted towards stabilising England's finances. Elizabeth was also careful about raising taxes. Increasing taxes risked alienating her subjects, so she only considered it when essential. By avoiding tax hikes and unnecessary expenses, Elizabeth aimed to maintain both financial stability and public support, ruling with prudence in the early years of her reign. Challenges from abroad. When Elizabeth became queen, she faced challenges from powerful nations abroad, each of which could threaten her reign and England's stability. Spain. Spain was the wealthiest and most powerful country in Europe, enriched by gold and silver from its colonies in the Americas. Philip II of Spain, Elizabeth's former brother-in-law through her sister Mary I, was a devout Catholic, with close ties to the Holy Roman Empire. In the mid-1500s, Spain ruled over the Netherlands, parts of Italy and Portugal, giving it extensive influence across Europe. Philip, as a strong Catholic, viewed Protestant England with suspicion, making relations between Spain and England tense. France. France was another powerful nation and a traditional enemy of England. Under Mary I, England had lost Calais, the last English-held territory in France, which remained a sore point and a reminder of past conflicts. France also posed a particular threat, as it supported Mary Queen of Scots, who many Catholics saw as the rightful Queen of England. Scotland. Scotland was ruled by the Stuart family and had a long history of rivalry with England. Scotland's main ally was France, a relationship known as the Old Alliance. This alliance meant that Scotland and France could potentially unite against England, which posed a serious threat. With Mary Queen of Scots returning to Scotland in 1561, there was an increased risk that Catholic Scotland, allied with France, could become a base for challenging Elizabeth's rule. The Netherlands. The Netherlands was an important trade partner for England, especially for the wool and cloth trades, which were essential to England's economy. However, the Netherlands was under Spanish control, and the Protestant Reformation had begun to spread there, leading to religious conflict with Catholic Spain. Elizabeth supported the Protestant cause in the Netherlands, which angered Spain and strained relations further. Ireland. Ireland was another source of concern for Elizabeth. Although her father Henry VIII had declared himself King of Ireland, the country remained mostly Catholic. This was a problem for Elizabeth because she feared that Catholic nations, like Spain or France, might use Ireland as a base to launch an invasion of England. The Irish Rebellion in 1559 highlighted these fears, as Ireland's Catholic majority could potentially side with foreign Catholic powers against Protestant England. In summary, Elizabeth had to assert strength as a female ruler, overcoming prejudice in a male-dominated society while dealing with political and religious threats at home and abroad. Elizabeth faced challenges to her legitimacy, as many Catholics did not accept her right to rule, seeing her as illegitimate and preferring Mary Queen of Scots. Marriage and succession were major issues, as Elizabeth was pressured to marry to secure the Tudor line, but she feared losing her independence or creating unrest. Religious divisions made England unstable, and Elizabeth had to carefully balance Catholic and Protestant beliefs to avoid further conflict after years of divisive religious change. Elizabeth inherited serious financial problems, with England heavily in debt, forcing her to rule cautiously and avoid expensive wars or raising taxes too much. And threats from abroad increased tension, with Catholic powers like Spain and France posing dangers to Elizabeth's Protestant rule and national security.